Hello all. Hope you guys are all well and having a great week. Tonight, Middlesex University Product Design Engineering and Design Engineering are really excited to host our 18th and penultimate talk in the academic guest lecture series. So this series runs weekly throughout the academic year on Thursday evenings, bringing together a vibrant mix of speakers from across the full spectrum of design and engineering, a mix of leading practitioners, opinion leaders, radical thinkers, and emerging talents to inspire and support your professional development. Tonight, we're super excited to host Tim Burrell-Saward. Tim's an award-winning designer. He works with creating playful products, experiences, games, exploring rich and engaging interactions between physical objects and the digital realm. He studied product design, and then he's also transitioned into architecture as well. And this led him to found a studio, building interactive installations for both museums and brands. From that as well, he founded a Sensible Object, a studio that worked on connected play, and they released 3 really well-received and critically acclaimed mass-produced physical digital games, including one of the first box games sold on shelves in Apple stores worldwide, which was The Beast of Balance. Then Sensible Object, the studio, it was acquired by Niantic in 2019. So they're an American software development company based in San Francisco, and best known for developing like the augmented reality mobile games such as Pokémon Go and Ingress. And Tim's latest release, Return to Dark Tower, it was featured on Kickstarter, and it raised over $4 million. And it's shipping right now as well. It made a cameo in a recent episode of South Park. Tim's a studio founder, connected game designer at Mother Ultimate LTD, and he's currently working on a new augmented reality game with the Science Museum London. So we're really excited to have Tim join us tonight. You guys all know the drill, so feel free to gather your thoughts, your questions, your comments in the chat throughout the talk. We'll have Q&A, depending on the relevancy, throughout the talk or at the end. And there's also the option to go live and interact with Tim after the main talk. And now over to Tim with a talk title, The Highs and Lows of Doing Your Own Thing.
That's quite an intro. Wow, thank you. Really good to be here. It's been quite a while. I've been, I think this is like the 4th time that this was scheduled to happen and then got cancelled because of COVID and everything. So it's really nice to be with you. It's a shame I can't be there in real life, but maybe next time. Yeah, right. So I'm here to kind of talk to you about, or rather the title of the talk is The Highs and Lows of Doing Your Own Thing. And the reason I chose that was because I wanted to talk you through how I've ended up doing what I do and where I've come from and the steps that I've taken. But I wanted to do it in a very open way because I remember when I was studying, when visiting lecturers would come in, more often than not, they would give me a very kind of shiny version of everything they've done. Everything would sound like it was planned, and you know they were living their best lives all the time. And in reality, it's not like that. So I wanted to, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend my time running you through what I've been doing, but I'm going to intersperse it with some advice that I hope you might find interesting. And as Ahmed said, stop at any time, ask any questions. Let's see how we go. So the first thing I'm going to start with is a very big caveat, which is I really have no idea what I'm doing. And honestly, like I said, if anyone comes to you and presents and says, hey, okay, so I started off on day 1, I graduated, then I went out and I did this, and now I'm a multimillionaire, it's all rubbish. Never trust anyone who says that they know what they're doing and that it's always been a straight path from A to B. It's just not like that. What I'm going to tell you is my journey. It is my truth as it stands today. It's probably going to change as I keep growing. There's a lot of it's going to be wrong or may not be applicable to you. So, you know, your mileage may vary. What I do in a nutshell, digital and physical technologies to make games, mainly games nowadays, mainly kind of commercial games, but also installations and experiences, and really things that can only exist when those 2 mediums come together. And what that really means is that I'm an industrial designer and I'm a game designer and I'm a creative technologist, and I happen to have ended up specializing in play. So as I mentioned, I'll take you through some my career path, but just so you know where I'm at, or some of the kind of highlights. So, you know, some teasers of what's to come. As Ahmed said, I made a game called Beasts of Balance, which became the first physical game sold in Apple stores globally, which was a fairly big thing for us at the time as a really scrappy startup that I'll tell you more about later down the line. And also, again, as mentioned, super bizarrely, a few weeks ago, this happened weirdly. That game on the table is the game that I've just finished off making. Nobody knew it was going to happen. It just turns out that the makers of South Park really like board games, and they sometimes put them in. So that was kind of fun. So before I get into the projects, I think it's really important that you get a little bit of an understanding about myself, where I'm at in my life, and what I consider to be success. All right, success is something that I'm going to talk about in a second because it's a very nuanced, it's a nuanced word. But what I don't want you to be thinking throughout this whole process is how is he doing this, and like how much does he earn? Someone always asks, and it's super awkward because I'm British and I hate that question. Someone's always like, how much money do you make? I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to give some clues about the lifestyle that I maintain in order that you can see, you can put context around some of the choices I've made. Because one of the big themes that's going to run through this talk is as you make your decisions on your career, you're going to have choices, and some of them will be cognizant and some of them that will be random. You won't know you've made them until later down the line. But some of those choices are going to directly influence the type of life that you lead. So for me, super quickly, I live by the seaside. It's right out there behind me. I have a house. This is my family. I have 2 kids and my wife. My wife's a scientist. I've got 2 cats. I have a car. I'm a volunteer lifeboat crew. I'm really shabbily bad at social media. Currently, in my finances wise, I have enough money to allow me to work for 6 months. It's got a runway. I have 6 months worth of runway, which means basically I can work on things for a period of 6 months before I have to start considering taking other projects on that I may not want to take on. So as I said, I want to be super honest with you. Some people would see that as a short runway. Some people would see that as a luxury. I have been working for myself, or rather I should say the last time I had a proper job was maybe 10 years ago. And I've kind of reached this equilibrium where I know that's okay for me. It gives me some flexibility to do the stuff I want to do, whilst also keeping a bit of pressure on. Here's one that you may or may not care about. I don't have a pension. Again, I want to be super honest with you about the direction my career has gone in. So I've made some choices that means that I have flexibility currently at the expense of long-term security, but I'm okay with that. All right. So moving on, the first piece of advice I want to give you, and I'm calling it dubious advice because it applies to me. It may not apply to you. Take it or leave it. So the reason I just showed you all of that stuff is because success is something you want to think about in terms of what that word means to you. Fame, money, knowledge, security, change, happiness. These are all different types of success. There are many more. They're all completely valid, but they're all completely personal. I think, or I have come to believe, that it is worth thinking about success means to what success means to you, in order that you can start to plot a course that will get you to that. And be super honest with you. A lot of people, fame and money are the 2 things they go for. If you want fame and money, it means that you may need to take choices in the directions you take your career that you may not take otherwise. They may fly straight in the face of something like happiness. Everyone equates money to happiness. It doesn't work like that. If anything, the more money you have, the more stressful things can be. For me, happiness in the stuff I do has always been baked. If I'm not happy making things, and I mean the physical process of producing the products that I'm doing, the projects I'm doing, if that doesn't make me happy, but also if the end result doesn't bring people the emotion of happiness, I find my interest starts to wane. So I have focused my career to date on making happiness a goal and knowledge as a goal, definitely at the expense of security. Job security is something that I do not have, and I don't really care about it. It's working out, whatever. But be aware, I think, of or try to think about what you would define happiness as. And be also super conscious, this is going to change with time, you know, but right now in your early careers, have a think about where you want to go, and it will, you know, put you up in the right direction. All right, so my career started out in Brighton. I studied at the University of Brighton. I studied product design. It was a BSc course, very technical. And coming out of that course, I had a good technical understanding, but I had absolutely no connections with industry. I had no idea about critical design thinking or any kind of artistic side of things. So I kind of came out and I didn't really know what to do next. And I didn't really have any guidance from the uni. So I did what a lot of people do. And I thought, right, I have to get a job. I have to get a job in design. And it doesn't matter what kind of design it is. It just has to be a job in design. And the only job I could find in design was actually in architecture, in lighting, which is something I didn't even know that was a job before I started looking. And I should say as well, there was like a 6 months or even closer to a year time where I was trying to find a position in design. I ended up spending 5 years working in architectural lighting, doing stuff like lighting, you know, buildings, obviously, and landscapes and monuments, and, you know, doing bits and pieces of design of the actual light fittings. But really, I spent a lot of time making very, very rich people's houses look nice, and also designing completely soulless hotels. The only one of these projects that's mine actually is the one in the bottom right, which is that Hilton Hotel. And the reason I put it there is because I worked on that building for 3 years. And the day that it opened, I walked in and I went, well, that was a waste of time, because it just looked like an entirely generic hotel. So at that point, I realized, okay, cool, I've done this for a little bit. You know, I'm kind of finished with this. And there's a pattern with my work that I've noticed, which is I'll do something for a while, I'll get bored of it, realize it's not what I want to do forever, and then I'll do a little pivot and move on. Which leaves me to my next piece of advice, which is really, really important, I believe, for where you're at in your careers, is flexibility is one of your greatest tools. The further you get in a career, the higher you climb the ladder, the more difficult it is to transition off that ladder in another direction. So whilst you're at the kind of infancy of your professional practice, explore your passions, right? And you may not know what those passions are, and the only way to know about them is just to carry on experimenting in different fields. But keep going, find something that interests you, and keep going down that path, even if you're not sure of where it's going to lead you. And then the flexibility comes in mind when you're looking out for opportunities. So me, I wasn't interested in architecture, but it was something that came along, and I thought, all right, cool, there's enough of a connection. I'm going to see where this path leads. Experience is better than money. I know that's massive caveats for that. Everyone still needs to eat, but be wary of chasing money early days, because you may find that it pushes you up that ladder just a little bit too far, that makes it harder for you to, you know, go off in a different direction down the line if you so want to. So I quit one day, I cold quit, and I took myself, I had a tiny amount of savings, like a couple of grand, I think, maybe even less. And I took myself to Copenhagen to study interaction design. I did a short course over a summer, just because I was interested in it, and I thought it might be you know, it might kind of dovetail into what I've been doing before. And my eyes were open to the world of how people interact with the objects around them, how they interact with their environments, and also how feasible it is to dip a toe into that world and to start to prototype and play with it. So around this time was when Arduino was kind of coming to the forefront. So I was lucky enough to be taught by one of the inventors, and it just made me think, okay, cool, I can start to play with interactions and the built environment and experiment with it in a way that I just had no introduction to during my formative studying. Dubious advice number 3. There's 10 of these, by the way. I think I mentioned it before, but everything you do goes together to create a unique view of the world that only you have. And even all of the people on your course that you think you're going to be more or less identical to, you're really not, because your interests and your experience and your passions are all completely different. So nothing is wasted when you think of it like that. Even if you've got a job that's completely unrelated to design in any way, shape, or form, there are going to be things, there are going to be skills you learn, there are going to be people you meet, there are soft skills and hard skills that are going to mean that you're going to come out of that with a different view to anyone else. And something I spent a lot of time trying to do with my professional practice is it's almost like therapy. I'm trying to work out how all of these different strands go together so that I can make something that only I can make. And that's really interesting. So again, you know, this may not apply to you. If you've got your path mapped out, you know where you're going, then that's fine. But for anyone else who's still feeling around the edges, that's fine. You know, just think about what's unique that you can bring to the table. And I promise you the answer isn't nothing. There's going to be something that only you can do. So I came back from Copenhagen and I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to build some stuff and I'm going to see if I can make this work. So what I was doing was going out and trying to talk to brands and agencies and saying, look, I can build you cool things for your events, your galleries or whatever. And I can also do it really cheap because I was just me. I didn't have a big studio. I was flexible. And I knew that, you know, starting out when I didn't have a name, if I could offer myself at a cheaper price, then it would probably be attractive. And it was, you know, because it turns out there are loads of events with cool companies and things going out there, and they all want something. They all want their event to stand out, but a lot of them don't have huge budgets. So, you know, again, that's why I was saying experience can sometimes be better than money. For instance, I managed to blag building a big data visualization sculpture for Wikipedia's 20th anniversary. So this is it's actually really simple. It's a load of thermal receipt printers. And I worked with a really talented coder to link it up live to Wikipedia so that anytime an edit or a change was made to the website, it would spit out a little one of these dockets, and then they would fall to the floor. And so the whole idea is over the course of the evening, this kind of very physical representation of how much traffic goes through Wikipedia built up, which was useful for them because it allowed them to go and convince people to donate more. I did this for like a couple of £100 with materials. It cost me way more than that, I think, but it was the thing that I could then use as an example to go on and go elsewhere. So it's kind of like like a weird internship, I guess. I wanted to share a couple of other projects before I get onto the more overtly product design-y type thing, just to illustrate the same process. So this is a collection of projects that I did, and it started out with just a kind of interest. So down the bottom, you can see there's a waveform there. That waveform is electromagnetic radiation that was captured by the Voyager probes off the when the probes were going past all of the big celestial bodies like Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus. And I've always been super interested in space. And I had some time on my hands, so I thought, right, let's do a project, and then maybe I can use it to get more work. So what I did is I took these waveforms and I worked with an audio composer to turn them into sound. And I also then turned those waveforms into physical form. So what you can see in the middle with the guy holding the object, inside there is a tiny little MP3 player. On the MP3 player is I think there are like 60-minute composition made up of these waveforms. And then the physical form, the undulating surface, is made from the same waveforms. So I made a few of those, and I think I posted them online, and a gallery owner got in contact, and I did a really, really small gallery show. And then everything went quiet for a few months, and then I got a call from the Tate saying like, hey, we've seen these things, we have an event coming, can you build a version of it, for the event? So like I've gone from one thing that I made just for me to a teeny tiny little gallery show to all of a sudden showing it in like one of the biggest, most established galleries in the country. And that one on the right, that's the thing that I built, that's part of it, I should say. So that's the Gale crater, which is on Mars. And I did another audio composition. It was in a really big room with massive like throbbing bass, and it was really nice. So I guess the point of showing that is, it's about exploring your interests and then just trusting that if you keep going down that path, something will come out of it. And you never know unless you start down the path. The last one I wanted to show you, this is a neat transition between the installation stuff and the product design stuff. This is a throne. This is a talking throne that I built for Kensington Palace for a Christmas exhibition they did 10 years ago. So the whole premise here is like, you go in, you pick up one of these boards, and I think there are something like 200 different words and adjectives that you could use to assemble your title. And then you climb the steps and turn around. And when you sat down on the throne, this booming voice from inside the throne would announce you, announcing the cheeky Queen of London, and all the trumpets would burst into song and streamers would come out of them. It was like a little the jewel in the crown at the end of the exhibition. So we built this. It was supposed to last for a month, and then it was donated to a place called the Story Museum in Oxford, where it's lived ever since. And it's been in daily use for the last 10 years. And I actually got a phone call this week asking if I could rebuild it, because it's so knackered now that they want to rebuild it. And they sent me through, I couldn't find the picture to put it in here, but they sent me through a photo of the throne, and it's completely all of the fabric has worn away because of, like, I guess hundreds of thousands of little bums sitting on it for the last 10 years. So again, build stuff. If I hadn't built it, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. It's a super weird thing. I didn't make a lot of money on it at the time, but you got to sniff out the things that you're interested in and trust that they're going to go somewhere. So after doing this, I kind of realized that the business model that I was working on, which was making bespoke things for different clients, so every time it had to be different, and the research time, the R&D time in these projects was massive. I kind of decided it wasn't really sustainable because I was knackered. So advice number 4, realize that you are a finite resource. The older you get, the more life is going to be pulling on that resource. So the sooner you start working smart, as well as working hard, then the better you'll be. And I say that because when I was making those installations, I was spending like 12, 14, 16 hours in the workshop putting this stuff together, and it would come together and it would be brilliant, and it would have the desired emotional effect on the people using it. Everyone would be happy, everyone would be having a good time, but it wasn't sustainable for me as an individual. Friends. Everything I do nowadays, I involve a bunch of people. I work mostly with freelancers. And the reason for that is I can cherry pick all the good people and I can get them in to do exactly what they're good at. And then I don't have to, they don't get saddled with my projects, and I don't have to, keep them on the books and have all of that worry. So, friends, keep in contact with everyone you're on your course with. There will be things that come up where you need specific skills. And, you can try and learn everything yourself, but it is so much more fun if you try and involve other people. So moving on to the next part that I want to get to, which is the product designy stuff. So we finished that product, and I sat down with a couple of the guys that I'd made that with, and we had a chat about how our skill sets and our experience, what we could tailor that to that would be unique to us, right? Exactly as I said before. And we decided that we were interested in taking the essence of those interactive installations. So the idea of social, engaging, playful objects that use technologies in interesting ways. We thought that we would try and distill that down into something that could be replicated at larger scales and that would, have a life outside of the exhibition space. And at the time, it just so happened that a lot of people were talking about screen time with kids. This isn't a piece of advice. Well, it kind of is, but I don't have a slide for it. keep an ear out to trends, because it can make it easier for you to get something started. So right now, everybody's talking about energy prices and cost of living, and yeah, I mean, trying to use renewable resources, that kind of stuff. A smart move would be to look into that area to see if there's any scope for you to work on, for you to start projects up in, because it could just mean that people will be more receptive to it. There could be more funding, which leads me nicely to piece of advice number 5. Funding. I'm sure there are some of you out there listening to this that have ideas for things that you want to do, but you don't have the capital and you have no idea how to get it, right? It's not something that is easy to work out. Funding is out there. I promise you can find funding, but you do have to perform a little bit for it. And the type of dancing you do, the type of performance you do, completely depends on where you get that funding from. Some people can self-fund. I cannot do that. Some people will go to their friends and family and borrow some cash. Not ever happened for me. Some people go to banks for loans. It's super risky because it's on you, but that option is out there. Grants are how I've done a lot of my projects. I'll talk about those in a minute. Crowdfunding, Kickstarter. I've done 3 Kickstarters now. 4, 3 or 4? 3, 4. Let's call it 4. I've raised over $5 million on Kickstarter, right? Making weird connected games. It is a completely viable resource if you have an idea that can reach an audience that's already established on Kickstarter, as games are. Publishers and distributors probably don't make so much sense if you're not making entertainment goods. It's the equivalent of going to someone like Mattel or Hasbro and saying, hey, I've got an idea, give me some money and I'll make it. Maybe there are similar companies in the field that you're interested in. And investors are obviously the big one. Everyone always talks about investors. I'll come back to investors. I've been there. It changes things. In terms of grants, this would always be my first stop for anyone who has an idea and is looking for funding. To do the project that I'll talk about next, called Beasts of Balance, we got, I think it was £30,000 funding from the UK Research and Innovation. It was called something else back in the day, but we got some government funding for it. Gov UK has some funding. Arts Council England has some. Doesn't have much anymore, but it does have some. These are only the ones that I tend to look at. There's probably a load more. And the really nice thing about all these services, you may know them already, is if you go on the UKRI website, it will give a list of the different funding pots that they have available and the themes of the projects that they want to spend that money on, which means that you can go and you can look and you can see if there's something that is tangentially related to your project. And if there is, you can kind of retool the project ever so slightly. You might consider doing this in order to qualify for that. Something that's really important to note is these application processes are horrific and long and archaic. I think the Innovate UK one is something like 16 pages long. There are people out there whose job it is to fill these things in. I generally, when I go for grants, I generally pay someone a few £100, or even I'll say, if we get the funding, I'll give you this much. And then they can come on and do all of the, what I find quite boring, the grant application writing. Okay. So we got some cash, and we got some cash based on the idea of we want to build a game that brings adults and kids together, that uses technology in innovative ways, and that can be replicated at scale. They said, sure, here's some cash. So we set about making a prototype. There were 5 of us at the time. And this is the game that we made. I'm going to turn the volume off because you don't need to hear about it. It's called Beasts of Balance. It is a game, as I said, specifically aimed for families. It involves stacking objects, 24 physical objects. So you're stacking them kind of like Jenga. But then everything that you add to the tower does something to a connected world that plays out on a tablet. So you add an octopus and an octopus arrives in the world. And then the game's about remixing them and feeding them and powering them up and making them fight each other. So it's kind of like very, very light touch educational. But at the end of the day, it's just a kind of fun dexterity game. Yeah, so that's the game. That's the first game that we took to Kickstarter. I'd say that's probably about a year's worth of work for 5 of us. That's what it looks like on the left. That was the kind of core set. And then on the right was how the range looked after we'd done a second Kickstarter. So there's all sorts of stuff in there. It's running off RFID and Bluetooth. There's nothing super unusual. It's nothing super cutting edge, but it's very robust. It doesn't break. It was relatively affordable to make. And it was, it was light and fluffy, and it was well suited to the market. Through making it, as we said before, we managed to get it in the Apple stores, and through there, we ended up working quite closely with them on some of their new technologies, including AR, when that was the thing that they wanted to push. So we worked with them to integrate it into the game. So again, that kind of goes back to this thing of, you start with a small thing and you make it, and then cool things will happen and it will change. And we never thought we'd be working with Apple on something as ridiculous like this. You never know until you start doing it, right? And the cool thing for me is it was successful in my definition of success. It is something that's brought so much happiness to people, especially with kids and adults together. So, yeah, it's just a nice picture. I just like that picture. So there were 5 of us to start with. We ended up with 25. There's only 12 in that second picture, but that's the only picture I could find. The reason I put this in is because things changed. And I mentioned investment before. When you start to scale, and if you remember, I think I called out scale as one of the success criteria. If I didn't, some people just want to make large companies. The thing to be wary with scale is scale equals more cost and more stress. And in our case, it meant that we had to take investment from outside angel investors and from hedge funds. We raised nearly 4 million pounds, I think, of investment to grow the team and grow the projects. And it allowed us to do some cool stuff. But what I wanted to focus on, or what I wanted to highlight, was the fact that it changed the dynamic of what we were doing massively. All of a sudden, you have a bunch of people sitting on your shoulders who all have their own idea of what you should be doing and where you should be going. And you're kind of beholden to them in a lot of ways because they've given you their money. And the way that played out for us is this thing. So this is a board game that was made for the Alexa platform. Alexa was kind of brand new at the time. And we managed to get an in, I think, with them, and they wanted something to kind of to display the qualities of it. And so, like, way quicker than we should have, we made this game, and it was half baked. It didn't know what it was. It didn't know who its audience was. The technology powering it was still flaky, so the experience of it wasn't as smooth as we were accustomed to with our own stuff, and it didn't do very well. And it was by no means the end of the company, but I distinctly remember coming to the end of that project and going, oh, we wouldn't have done that if we hadn't been asked to do it. So I guess the moral of this is a lot of people, when they're following the Silicon Valley startup model, they come up with an idea, they go straight out to find investment. That's fine. Just be aware that as soon as you bring investors on, you're essentially bringing in people, other voices into your idea who have sway over how that idea is executed. Dubious advice number 6, integrity. It's easy to forget when things get tough. We, I think, with that project, lost our integrity. Try and keep it. You know, you want to be proud of the things you do. If you're following your passions, they're your passions because, you know, they're part of you. So make sure you kind of keep track of why you're doing the things you're doing. As was mentioned, so the company ended up getting acquired by Niantic, who make Pokemon Go. Really, that was because we needed the support of a larger company, and they just wanted to fold us in to do their own stuff. So it's actually at this point I left the company because Niantic, if you know them, they make games that are purely digital games, and I come from a physical background. So I had a choice to make. Do I follow the money and go in, like become a cog within a much bigger machine and just make software games, or do I not do that and follow my goal, which was happiness? So that's what I did. So a lot of the team still work at Niantic, and this was back in 2019, I think. But at that point, I stepped away and I made the next thing, which is this crazy thing. So this is Return to Dark Tower. It's another game. This is like way more overtly board gamey than the one before. So I partnered up with some people who are very well known within that scene, some designers, and we tried to make something that was as kind of weird and complex and showy and amazingly unknown as we could. And this came out. So what you've got is a giant mechatronic tower, which has infrared sensors in it. It has Bluetooth because it connects to the app again. There's bits that slide off. It has bits inside that rotate. So inside there are 3 gearboxes. There is a speaker. There are 16 LEDs, I think, individually addressable LEDs. A lot of parts in that. A lot of parts. And that's maybe, again, like a 1.5 years of development from start to finish. I've actually got a full talk on the development process of that I can share with you separate to this if you want to go into more details. And that was made with a team of 5, I think: app developer, electronics engineer, me doing industrial design, game designer, sound designer. That was it, I think. Someone you might recognize. I had some help from Middlesex's own Joe. Again, just working with freelancers, I get to cherry pick the best people that I can find. And it was a lovely project. And it raised, kind of crazily, it raised over $4 million in 30 days on Kickstarter. And I'm not trying to brag about that, but the reason that's important, I think, is because the internet kind of changes this idea of a niche audience. Who would have thought that that game, by the way, was nearly $200 to buy, which seems crazy, but with that particular audience, so the Kickstarter crowd, the board game crowd on Kickstarter, they're rabid for new, unusual, unique experiences within that field. So, I didn't just go into that thinking I'm going to make this crazy, complex, expensive thing and hope that it finds an audience. I knew there was an audience for this kind of thing already. So I de-risked it as much as possible. So what I'm saying here is, when I talked earlier about your passions and following your passions or being aware of your passions and your goals, none of us are unique little butterflies. There are thousands or hundreds of thousands or whatever around the world of people who are into the same stuff you are. And if you can think of something that makes you excited, chances are, if you can find them, other people are going to find it exciting too. I do some other stuff as well. I do a lot of immersive theatre, which I'm really keen on. But again, it's kind of integrating technology into theatre. So I work with a company called Punch Drunk, that some of you may know, who do very, very large, large live experiences. And I really like that because, again, I would not be able to dip a toe into this world if it wasn't for exactly my path, from product design to architecture to the technology stuff to games. I just wouldn't be able to play with these people if I hadn't done that, right? And also because I don't want you to think I'm not altruistic at all. I do have I am aware of what's going on in the world. During the pandemic, I helped set up a big print farm, which I think you did the same thing actually at Middlesex, I think. Yeah, damn, I just remembered you did that, and I think you probably made a lot more than we did. We made 100,000 face masks. If you made more than that, pretend you didn't, so I don't feel as bad. And the reason I put those two in is because the other thing I've realized through my career to date is there's no one saying that you have to do the same thing all the time. You know, if I just stayed doing architecture, I would be very bored right now, and I would not have a huge transferable skill set. So, you know, at the beginning of your career, by all means, take safer optional, go and get experience in places, build up that skill set, but jump around. It's much more fun that way. So I just got a couple more slides and then I'm done. So I'm currently working on a project with Niantic again and the Science Museum. This is a pure app-based experience. I'm spending a lot more time thinking about the you know, the footprint of the stuff I make and trying to reduce the amount of plastics and logistics, etc. that of the stuff I do. So this one is purely digital. Ironically, I'm doing it's purely digital, so that's going to be out fairly soon. And I thought I'd end. I've got two more pieces of advice, then I'm done. So number 9, be flexible. I think I've hammered that point home. The more flexible you can be at the earlier stages of your career, the more opportunities you're going to be opened up to. But the flip side of that is it's very chaotic and it's very uncertain. I haven't had no job security for the last 10 years because it's essentially it's all down to me to make this work. I think probably early days there was a nerve in my head that would panic about that, but I think by now it's just kind of burnt out. That nerve isn't there anymore. You may be fine with the idea of chaos and uncertainty. You may thrive in it, or you may not. There is no right or wrong answer. Just be aware of your boundaries, be aware of what you're happy with and the direction you want to go, and then you can start to make some choices. And the last one, probably the biggest piece of advice I've got is just relax. I remember distinctly what it was like studying and coming to the end of my studies and just worrying about what was going to happen next. It's okay not to know. You know, you got to follow the things that interest you. Don't look at what anyone else is doing. Just keep doing your thing. Take the side hustles, take the jobs you don't tell anyone about to pay the bills. I promise you, most people do jobs that they don't tell people about. In fact, I'm trying to think, here's the thing. Next time someone comes to talk to you, ask them if they do take on projects that they don't put on their website. I bet they do. You'll figure it out eventually. And yeah, a career is just doing a thing for long enough until, you've got enough stuff for a website. That's the end. I've got no idea what how I'm doing for time. That's pretty good, actually. So yeah, I hope that's interesting. You can find me there on the screen if you have any other questions. But otherwise, yeah, I'd love to hear any questions if you have them.
Tim, that was a fantastic talk. A really great overview of yourself, your journey, your inspirational work, actually, like a really honest and transparent context and advice as well in relation to doing your thing. Alongside obviously the insights into both industrial and gaming design. That's fantastic. We do have some questions coming through in the chat. So cool. Guys, feel free to continue to gather your thoughts and questions and comments if you want to. And if you want to go live, just obviously send a request in the chat and we'll definitely make it happen. First question coming in from Kai Stopford. Kai's asking, would you say that your time as a professional has become easier over time?
Oh, that's a tough one. No, you know what? It's not easier. It just changes. I think I worry a lot less. I trust. I trust that it'll work out. But I think because of the path I've taken and because of that flexibility that I've tried to maintain of always being able to bounce around and try my hand at different things, I think it's always difficult. I'm not going to lie. If you want to spend your time doing something you love, it's going to be tough. The easier option is always going to be just settling for something that isn't, doesn't fulfill those goals.
Amazing. And
good question.
Good, really good question. And Talk with Us is asking a question with regards to yourself and the sharing of your work. So how do you share your work? And did you share the MP3 project on social media only?
Yeah, so I'm really bad at social media. I find it very difficult to kind of pass the, you know how like everybody only posts the good stuff that they've done, right? Yeah, everyone's having the best day, and I find it quite hard to deal with that. Being brutally honest, you know, it kind of makes me feel like if I haven't had the most productive day ever, I kind of internalize that, so I keep it at arm's length. And that the downside of that is that it's harder for me to push my stuff out there because I just don't put the work in. And I would say, you know, especially coming up now where social media is such a big important part of you know, of getting work and finding people, I probably should spend more time doing it. So that particular project is on my website, I think. If not, I can post it up, the sound one. But how do I share my stuff? When I complete a project, what I like to do now is do kind of breakdowns or postmortems online. So I'll record something. I'm doing a teardown of the tower project next week. We're going to live stream that on Twitch for a couple of hours, just to literally take the whole thing apart. And I'll have the app developer on, and we'll go through all of the design decisions and the prototype and the whole process. So again, I'll share that with you. You'll probably find that interesting, actually, you guys.
That's amazing, actually. What's it called? That can be quite inspiring in terms of, you know, understanding how things are made and work, how they work, and obviously the process. And
yeah,
really nice case studies as well. In terms of work, obviously you mentioned that you're not that great at obviously sharing stuff online and social media and stuff. So a question coming through in terms of like, how do you get work and connect with larger institutions and companies like Niantic, places like the Science Museum and the Kensington Palace?
Yeah. So where I'm at now, I can, this isn't helpful for you at all, but I can kind of knock on the door and say, hey, look, here's some stuff I've done. Let's have a chat. To make that relevant to the kind of stages that you're at, or rather, what would I want to see in order to kind of open the door to somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience? Showing interest in the things, the thing that institution is already doing is the number one thing, right? I promise you, you are not going to get very far if you're looking for employment, or if you're looking for project work. You're not going to get very far by just sending out boilerplate CVs, right? Because anywhere decent is going to get so many of those. I know it's heartbreaking. I've been through this is the same thing. It's much better for you to focus on, let's say, what I'll do now is I'll say, okay, this company is really interesting to me, like Lego, for instance. So I'm doing some bits and pieces with them. That started by me essentially kind of stalking the right people, just finding out who they were through LinkedIn, sending some messages, pushing my work in front of them, and going to them with something that's interesting to them, an idea or a provocation, or like, hey, here's a thing that I've been thinking about. Are you doing anything with that? If not, would you be interested in talking about working together, right? The same thing, that game project was exactly the same thing. I was like, hey, I really want to do this kind of stupid idea. Are you interested in it? And it's just about finding other people who are just going to be equally as interested in you. So to answer the question in a pithy way, how do I get projects? I will spend time beforehand thinking up a reason why they should give me the half an hour phone call that I want to have with them in order to like get a foot in the door. That's the most important thing.
Amazing. That's superb. And Olise is asking a question in terms of your inspiration behind some of your projects. So for example, what was your inspiration for the project Dark Towers? And was it like a Lord of the Rings, D&D? How do you get inspiration?
Yeah, so that one was an interesting one. It was actually it's kind of like a sequel to a game that came out in 1981 in the States called Dark Tower, and it had this game like almost mythological status because so people wanted it, but they couldn't get it because it was quite expensive at the time. So I worked with a couple of designers, game designers in the States who are kind of like game design royalty, I guess, in that world. And they wanted to remake it. So with that one, it was a case of looking at what had come before and how new technologies and new design thinking, new game design mechanics could be applied to it to make it into something new. Other projects, oh man, it comes from anywhere. Beast of Balance came from, I was on a holiday in Mexico and I saw these, I've got one around here. Here we go. I've got a little one here. Here we go. Some of you guys might have seen it. There's a Pixar film, I think, called Coco, which is about Mexican. You see this little guy? These are called Alebrije. They're little Mexican dream creatures, and I was like collecting them, and that's what informed the art style anyway. You know, it comes from anywhere. Yeah, I don't know. You just got to absorb everything and let it go around in your head, and eventually it will make sense.
Amazing. And with regards to the Beast of Balance, what manufacturing processes did you use for the final physical toys? And what's your experience with the outsourcing of manufacture as well?
Yeah, that's a great one. So they are injection molded ABS. They have a rubber texture coating applied to them for friction. They're two-part molds. They're very simple molds. You know, they're all kind of one-directional molds to keep them cost-effective. That game was made in a factory in mainland China, who I've used a bunch of times. So the story there was we were put in contact with a kind of middleman who works in Hong Kong, whose job it is to work with Western designers and put them in touch with East Asian manufacturing. So we worked with him, and he put us in touch with this factory that does toys and games and like for Disney and all that kind of stuff. And I went out to visit them a bunch of times. I know a lot of the people out there really well. I've worked with them on a number of occasions now. In fact, one of them is moving over here to live, and he's going to move not too far away from me now. So they're really nice people. Some of the most talented engineers you would ever have the pleasure of working to. Like the quality of their workmanship is just incredible. And the knowledge base that they have is something else. I mean, unfortunately, the flip side of that is we should not be shipping plastic around the world right now, right? We shouldn't be using fossil fuels within the plastic. We shouldn't be using virgin plastics anymore, which is something I'm trying to work on now, is alternative methods of manufacturing this stuff, whether it's distributed manufacturing, whether it's using regrind instead of virgin plastics. I think there's a lot of scope for, well, it's not scope, there is a requirement for anyone making a thing to examine the processes they use and try and reduce the impact this stuff is having. And I'm a little bit on the back foot with this stuff, but I do try and work it in now, even to things like packaging. Right, packaging is such a big user of raw materials. You think of all of the single-use plastics that come, cellophane that things come wrapped in. And boxes, when you buy a box and it's 50% air, then that's really bad for logistics. So examining everything and trying to reduce it all down. It's a path I'm on, and it's something I'm spending much more time talking about now, thinking about anyway.
Amazing. And Ramsey, he's asking a question: how long does it take you in terms of coming up with an idea and project?
Man, ideas are the easy bit. It's actually going from the idea and taking it on to the next stage that's hard. And I guess it'll be easier for you because you're in that process of, it's part of the process of studying, right? But when you come out and suddenly you realize that you have to manifest one of those ideas into a thing, otherwise you're not going to be able to pay your rent next year. It changes the dynamic a little bit. So To answer the question, if you're working in a field that you're passionate about, you will naturally just come up with ideas all the time. And the skill is then figuring out which ones of those you should boil down and you should take into the next stage of the process. I use the double diamond. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. I have like my own version of it. It's an adapted version that works with software as well as hardware. I follow that same process. You know, a grain goes into that end of the triangle, and you play with it, and then you know when to bring it back in. It works, you know.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. Diverge, converge.
24/7.
And then another question coming in from Ramsey, I guess a sequel to that would be, how many projects of yours have not made the cut or failed?
Ooh, that's a good one. I haven't had any failure. Oh, all right. Okay. So I haven't shipped anything that has been a colossal failure. When you're shipping manufactured stuff, there's a rule of thumb that if you have a return rate or a defect rate of 1% or higher, if it hits 1%, you're in trouble, right? I've never had anything get anywhere close to that, and that's because I work with good people. You know, I realize when I'm out of my depth and I need to bring someone else on who understands this stuff. That you will get into trouble if you try and do everything yourself. You know, that's not a good way of doing things. So I've never had something shipped that's failed. Touch wood, Christ, because this game is shipping at the moment, and who knows what's going to happen. Like literally, it's all shipping now. It was like 30,000 copies or something. How many things have I started on that haven't made it through? Too many to count. And I feel that's good. That's the way it should be. I've got probably like 6 different things right now on the go that are everything from more games to I'm looking at weird green energy projects. I'm doing stuff with like STEM stuff. I'm going all over the place. And you got to like, it's the diamond, right? You spread yourself out, and then 99% of them are going to fall by the wayside, or you lose interest, or something will happen that means it won't work. And the 1 or 2, they'll just be there. They'll be there, and you'll keep working on them. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're like, okay, cool. This has lived in my head enough that I have to do something with it.
Amazing. And I guess another question that leads on from that, from Rotted Cookhood, is asking, what's your favorite project that you worked on? Say you had to kind of pinpoint or single it down to a single project.
I think that's weird. I think it's the throne, actually. You know, it's such a weird, stupid thing, and it's not really what I'm interested in now, but just the fact that, you know, it was made for a really short period of time, and it's been bringing people joy for 10 years now, and it's going to be rebuilt, and it will continue doing it for another 10 years. And it's such a simple idea, but you know, sometimes the simple ideas are the best. It's a really corny thing to say, and it also, like I said when I was talking, it was the transition between the stuff I was doing before and what I'm doing now. That was the point, you know, where it was, if I hadn't have done that, then I would have been on a different path. So that will always be close to my heart, that one.
Amazing. And a question coming in from Iram Faruqa regarding investing and investors. What do you do to make your ideas look investable when trying to find investors? Like, what techniques would you say are most successful?
Okay. There is no getting around the fact that an investor, I mean, this is a whole talk in its own, but an investor needs to see you're passionate about the thing that you're bringing to them. They need to buy into that passion. So you need to convince them why they should be giving you your hard-earned money. And that comes down to just hard graft, right? There's actually, I wonder if, hang on. Just so happen to have a copy sat right here. This is a Bible. If anyone is considering going down the startup route, it's a little bit old now, and it's just like way too thick than it needs to be. I don't even see the Startup Owner's Manual. So this is basically I forget when it was. It's probably like 10 years old now, but it goes through there's a process, or there's certain information that any investor is going to want to see. And the good thing about putting together pitch decks for investors is you can follow a template. You're telling them a story, but you're telling them a story through numbers, really. So, you're demonstrating the size of the market, you're doing who are the competitors, what are you bringing to the market that's new, how much money do you need, when are you going to see a return on the investment. I'm trying, I don't want to overload anyone, but basically there are resources out there like the book like that you can just step by step go through as a guide, and it will give you exactly what you need to get a deck ready to take to investors. One thing I would say is practice it when you're pitching. Practice it before you get to the investors, and also accept the fact that you're probably going to have to go through like 50 investors before you get to one that's going to believe in you. It can be completely soul destroying. I didn't do most of that. One of the other guys on the team did, and I'm really happy I didn't, because it's you're a salesman, and that doesn't come naturally to everyone. Oh, you're muted.
100%. And Charles Mortimer's asking a question with regards to like getting started, both I guess in the sense of the startup and alongside in terms of projects. What would you say is the best thing to try and start with, or where would be the best to look?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. So if you are, I'm going to assume that you're kind of coming to the end of your studies. If you have an idea that you want to try and turn into a business, then more power to you. That's great. Don't be naive about it. So I find sometimes that university environments can feel quite sheltered. They're safe places, are designed to be, but it's very different when you're doing it for real. So follow the template. Do your research. If you come out of that process and you still have an idea that you think it warrants investment, then I personally would advise looking for grants before looking for investment. And the reason for that is, with grants, it's a lot more pleasant process. I know it sounds weird. You won't have somebody in a room telling you why your idea is shit and it's never going to succeed, because it's called negging. It's a thing that happens, right? People will try and break you down. The other thing is, grants mean that you keep the whole of the business entity, and investors, good or bad, they're going to try and get the best deal for them. And if you are fresh, if this is the first time you're pitching something, you may not know the best terms to ask for, and you may end up getting shafted. So go for grants, develop the idea, hold off an investment for as long as you can. Make sure the investors you're talking to are the most knowledgeable people about your subject area as you can find. They're going to be your mentors, as well as your cash cow, I guess. But then if you don't have that, if you don't have something that you are confident that you want to take forward as a startup, don't feel you have to. I think sometimes there's a belief that, every graduate today from an engineering degree or an IT degree, or even obviously a business degree, should be going on and doing their own startups. I think it's something that everybody should try at some point. It's a very interesting thing to embark on, but you got to do it when you're ready, and you've got buckets of time. So, work on those skills, get some experience in a field, even if it's not exactly the one that you want. It will all come right in the end, trust me.
Amazing. And Adam in painting, I'm a final year student from product design engineering. He wants to go live. Adam, feel free to.
Just go live.
Thank you, Ahmed. Tim, that was brilliant. It was absolutely wonderful to hear from you today, especially as someone myself that's looking to be an interactive designer and a creative technologist. Just a bit of context, my final major project is an interactive storytelling tool that uses AI object recognition and overhead projection system that augments the play space and the tools that you play around with. I just wanted to know what your opinion was on how AI will influence the interactive installation scene, games and board games alike?
I like it. It's good. This is what I'm talking about. It was a question, but it was also a mini pitch.
Thank
and now
you.
I want to
Yeah.
know more about your project. So it's good. This is the hustle. This is what you got to do. All right, cool. So I'm gonna answer that based on kind of the game stuff as opposed to the installations, because I don't tend to do as much of that anymore. AI, it's one of those things, right? So lots of people are looking at ways of putting AI and machine learning, and augmented reality has been around for a while. But to focus on AI and machine learning, there's lots of people trying to shoehorn it into every single concept that comes along, especially machine learning, because it is tangentially related to NFTs and all that side of thing, and everyone's trying to jump on that bandwagon. So I mean, AI has been used in video games for as long as it's been around. I think there would be interesting things you could do with that in the physical space, but the barrier of entry is quite high. So I'd be super interested to hear what you're doing, because obviously you have this is exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm guessing you have you chosen the storytelling space and the play space because you have a kind of natural interest in that area, or what made you work in that area? I'm going to ask you a question now.
Yeah, great question. I think it's a combination of my background. It was quite interesting to hear about how your background has influenced the way that you work. So I'm a theatre kid. I was previously on West End before I got into design.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also a storyteller by chance. That's just the two things that collided together when I started doing product design.
Right.
And I wanted to get into this as my final major project because it's specifically something that I enjoy doing, and I wanted to find out the next level of it. I'm a dungeon master for D&D of my friends, and I wanted to have the next level because I 3D print all of my scenery and sets, and I want to bring the next level of immersion to all those people. And I always see these Kickstarters going out of people 3D printing stuff and doing the next things for people. And I wanted to say, right, there's people that are making projectors and game boards with TVs in them. I was like, what's the next thing for them? And where else can I see that? So yeah, it was just trying to draw back on what I've done before, and also my influence in technology and how much I love all those sort of things.
Super smart. It's basically background research is what you're doing. You're just using your own upbringing as background research. I don't know if I answered your question, but I'd love to know more about that project. So,
yeah, I was going to say, I know you said that you weren't particularly great on social media, but if we could link on LinkedIn, and then I can share the project with you and get
not LinkedIn though. I can't stand LinkedIn. Let's connect.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thanks.
Good question. It was a cheeky one, but I like it. I respect that.
2 birds, 1 stone kind of thing.
Yeah, right? You got to do it. You got to hustle.
Look at that. And Zoe was also quite interested in connecting and hearing more about the kind of development of the most latest game. So she's asking, what's the Twitch channel name?
That's a good point. I don't actually have it. The company, if you want to find out, okay, here's the best thing to do. Follow me on Twitter if you have that. Because I'll post up when it goes live. The company I've been working with is called Restoration Games. You could follow them as well, but I'll post it up. I also have I did a talk last year at this thing called GDC, which is Games Developer Conference. It's in the States. It's like the biggest video game conference that they do every year. I've got a talk that I'm going to post up soon that I think you'll probably like as well, all of you, which is just about it's about the development process of Dark Tower, but it also talks about kind of managing risk in these weird projects, because risk is another thing I'm super conscious of. The weirder the project is, the more you have to offset that weirdness by making safer choices in other places in order to not like tip it over the edge. If something's too weird, people freak out and they don't know how to react to it, and they'll just stay away from it. So, but that's a talk for another time.
100%. And is that post going out on your website or on Twitter?
Yeah, both, but Twitter's probably the best place to keep an eye out for that.
Amazing. Zoe, definitely keep an eye out there. And I guess the final question is coming in from Tortvidas. And Tortvidas is asking, how do you prepare for Kickstarter campaigns and calculate expenses and delivery and logistics?
Another massive question. It is a science. It is something that I would be completely happy to come back and talk about another time, because I can fill a whole hour with do's and don'ts and Kickstarters. And there are a lot of people who make very basic mistakes that cost them a lot in terms of backing. I mean, the headlines are doing your research beforehand to know what's already out there. You can find out how much you can charge for your thing through comparing it to other people's Kickstarters. You know, there'll be a limit to what the audience is willing to pay, so you need to make sure you're within that. Most people, it takes about 2 months of fairly solid work to prep for a Kickstarter. You know, to build the community, to get in tabletop and board games on. So tabletop and board games is the biggest part of Kickstarter. It was I think it brought in $2 billion last year or something. It's massive. It's a legit industry on its own, and knowing how to appeal to those people is part of the science. And some people, they'll go to Kickstarter with a completely formed game and they'll just put it on and they'll go, okay, look, here's what I want to make. You either take it or you leave it. People who are slightly smarter will tailor the thing they're making to appeal to more of that crowd. And then when you start to talk about that, then that's when the integrity thing comes into it. How much do you dilute the thing that you want to make in order to maximize your chances of it succeeding? There's no right or wrong answer there. It's a big question. I will happily tackle that another time, because I would strongly recommend, if any of you have an idea that you want to see taken through to production, no matter what it is, crowdfunding is probably the first place that I would go before investors, because it's you know, no one takes that ownership of the business, and it's also, you know, it's also a really good test to whether your idea will have legs outside of Kickstarter. If it fails on Kickstarter, chances are it won't have a life anywhere else, you know.
Definitely. We'd be super stoked as well to have you back again talking about crowdfunding and the do's and don'ts of that as well. Obviously, depending on your time and availability.
Yeah, I mean, give me a breather and I'll put something together. But it's just because it's really hard to find this information.
Definitely.
You know, it's really hard to find somebody who can talk you through step by step the process of getting something made, you know, in a factory. I'm sure you're all very deeply aware of the theoretical steps that should happen, but there's a world of difference between that and actually what happens, and no one talks about it, because it's like they try and hide it as like, my information, no one else knows. No, it's not that. Like, I'll share hundreds of horror stories with you if you want.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because definitely obviously you have the theoretical aspects, and you know, you kind of know what content to produce and how to produce the content, but the real do's and don'ts, and you know, the kind of all of that comes from experience. And you know, like, you've been there, done that. You raised over $4 million, and I'm saying you know, that obviously insights would both be obviously generous and really valuable for the participants.
Yeah, anytime.
So Tim, just to round it off, a fantastic talk, superb Q&A as well. So thanks a lot for your time for the talk as well. The details of the talk and Tim were sent to your emails, guys, ahead of the talk, so including links to Tim's Twitter handle and the Mother Ultimate website. So definitely feel free to browse and connect. And to conclude, thank you, Tim, for taking out your time and joining us tonight. It was very informative, a great overview of yourself, your journey, advices, and insights into design and engineering.
Thank you for having me. Some good questions.
Amazing. And to all the participants and attendees who've joined tonight, students, staff, alumni, we really look forward to seeing you all again next week for the final guest lecture of the academic year. So keep an eye out on your emails for the details of the next speaker and links to the next talk. And until next time, stay well, stay safe, and thank you, guys.